So just to correct something real quick before we get started on the next section, I need to move these clouds back. So I'm going to set this to 1, and then I'm going to hit apply on that. And then the blue background I'm going to set to ZF2 to move it back even farther. This will allow our pipes to always be in front of the clouds. All right. So now we want to add some 2D colliders to our pipes. So let's go in here on our pipe 0. Let's go ahead and add a box collider 2D and do the same for our bottom pipe. And then remember, we need another box collider on our root view here for pipe. And we want to make this large enough so that when the trigger is exited, it triggers that execute past. So whenever the bird goes outside of this line, it's going to execute that execute past. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's make it just a little bit bigger. Alright, that looks good. Let's hit apply on that. Alright, so our pipes prefab is all good and ready to go. Alright, so how good would our game be without having a bird view in it? So let's go ahead and add a new view here to our bird. Control drag up to it. And our bird is also going to have some states. So let's go into the let's add a new enum. And let's call this bird state. Add a property for it. Wire it up. Let's add a alive and a dead state. And we want to have a bird max speed. And we'll set that to a float. And we're also going to have a flap velocity. And we'll make that a float. And before we generate the code, I'm going to go ahead and add a binding for the state changed. Because we want to know whenever its state changes, we want to do something. Particularly whenever it goes into the alive state, we want to reset its position to be vector 0, 0, 0. Alright, this looks good. Let's hit save and compile. And now I'm just going to open up this bird view. And I'm going to copy and paste a couple lines of code here. Alright, so basically what's going on here is if the bird state is not equal to alive, then we don't want to do anything. He's just going to sit there. But if it is alive, we want to add gravity to our velocity. We're going to manually calculate gravity. And what we're using is the bird view model from the generated property, and also using the parent angry flapper game property generated. Again, this is by the association where we said the game has one bird, so I can find it in reverse, and we're using that gravity property. Alright, so next we're checking to see if he did flap. And if he did flap, we're going to add to this velocity. And then we're going to clamp it to the bird's max speed. Then we just add the final velocity value and multiply it by time.delta time. Then we're going to angle the bird so that he starts to point more and more down straight to the ground as the velocity downwards increases. And then in our update, we're going to check if the space key is down or the mouse button is pressed. And we're going to set that did flap equals true. And just for example, if we had created a command on here called flapped, we could just simply call execute flapped right here to let the backend know that we flapped. And this would be good if we wanted to keep a counter for how many times they actually flapped at the end of the game. So I challenge you at the end of this to go in and actually add that. Add a flap counter to your game element, add a command to your bird, call execute flapped, increment that counter and show it in the game over screen. And we need to add one thing here to the binding we just added, state changed. And we want to say if value is equal to bird state dot alive. So when it first sets this, we want to say this dot transform dot position equals vector 3 0. So this will make sure that the bird gets reset. All right. Let's save that. Go back into our game view, wait for it to compile. And now we need to go actually add our view to our little flappy bird here. It's in our scene. So let's just click on him and then right click on our bird view. Go to add to selection. We want to initialize the view model. States at alive. Set the max speed to 5 and the flap velocity to 10. So one thing to note is because we're using the parent Angry Flappers game, whenever this property is set is whenever we apply this bird to the actual game, or we assign it to the game's bird property. As soon as it's assigned, it'll assign this value on the bird. So in order to do that initially, what we need to do is actually drag our bird view over and assign it to our view model property bird. So since this bird view owns the bird view model, it knows that on initialization of this view model property, to take the view model from this view and assign it to this bird property. So now when we run it, now we got our bird. He's moving up and down. So our game's starting to come together now.